Deep within the mines of Moria, when Durin's bane roared and shadow transformed into flame, the Fellowship of the Ring witnessed something impossible. They were not just watching an old man fighting a monster. They were witnessing a cosmic collision. For a brief, terrifying moment, the mask slipped. The grey pilgrim, the grumpy, weed-smoking, firework-making conjurer they thought they knew, vanished. And standing in his place was a being of pure, primordial power, an entity that could command the flame of Anor. We, the readers and scholars of the lore, know the truth. We know he is a Maia, an angelic spirit named Olórin, clothed in the flesh of an old man. But what about those who walked beside him? Did Aragorn know he was walking with a god? Did Legolas see the burning spirit beneath the grey cloak? And when he fell into the abyss, did they think he had truly died? Or did they know that something like him could never really perish? Welcome back to the Elven Perspective. Today we peel back the layers of the Grey Wizard. We will look through the eyes of hobbits, men, elves and dwarves to answer the question, who did the Fellowship think Gandalf actually was? To understand the confusion of the Fellowship, we must first understand the perfection of the disguise. When the Istari arrived in Middle-earth around the year 1000 of the Third Age, they did not descend from the heavens in chariots of fire. They arrived quietly, by boat, at the Grey Havens. They appeared as old men. This disguise was so effective that for centuries, the people of Middle-earth gave him names based on what he looked like, not what he was. Take the name Gandalf itself. In the tongue of the northern men, it literally translates to elf with a staff or wand elf. Think about the implications of that. The men of the north didn't think he was a god. They didn't even think he was human. They thought he was some kind of strange, elderly elf because he didn't die. Tolkien noted in a 1954 essay on the Istari, the wizards were emissaries from the west. But this was a secret known only to Círdan, Elrond, and Galadriel. Even the concept of a Maia, an angelic spirit, is never actually mentioned by name in The Lord of the Rings. That's right. If you only read The Lord of the Rings, you would never encounter the word Maia. It belongs to the Silmarillion. So we cannot expect Frodo or Gimli to know a theological term that doesn't even exist in their common vocabulary. To them, Gandalf was simply a wizard. And in Middle-earth, wizard didn't mean angel. It simply meant a wise man who knew the right spells. Let us begin with the Hobbits. To Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin, Gandalf was a figure of local folklore. He was the fireworks man. However, there is one profound moment where the veil begins to lift for a hobbit. It happens not in the Shire, but in the stone city of Minas Tirith. Peregrine Took, often considered the most foolish of the company, has a moment of piercing insight. Tolkien writes that as Pippin looked at Gandalf preparing for the siege, he suddenly felt a strange sensation. He looked at Denethor, who looked like a great wizard king. But in Gandalf, Pippin perceived the greater power and the deeper wisdom. He saw a majesty that was veiled. Pippin thinks to himself, he was older, far older. In what far time and place did he come into the world, and when would he leave it? It is a chilling moment. Pippin realizes that he is standing next to something ancient. He doesn't have the vocabulary to say, "He is Olórin of Valinor." But his heart knows that this old man predates the stone city they are standing in. Yet, even with this realization, the hobbits mourned him as a man in Moria. They believed he was dead, because to them, despite his power, he was mortal. What of the men and dwarves? Boromir represents the practical view. He respected Gandalf as a strategist, a mover of deeds, but he likely viewed him as a powerful human sage. If he had known Gandalf was a divine spirit, he never would have dared to argue with him on Caradhras. And Gimli? The dwarves are secretive, and their lore is different. Gimli treats Gandalf with immense respect, but there is little evidence that dwarves concern themselves with the hierarchy of the Valar. To Gimli, Gandalf was a powerful ally, perhaps a long-lived sorcerer, but likely nothing more divine than that. But Aragorn is a different matter. Aragorn was fostered in Rivendell. He speaks Elvish fluently. He knows the history of the First Age. He spent decades hunting with Gandalf. When Frodo asks if the Nazgul could defeat Gandalf, Aragorn laughs. "Gandalf is greater than you Shire folk know," he says. "You only see his jokes and toys." Aragorn knew Gandalf came from the west. He knew he was sent by powers higher than kings. Some scholars even suggest that Aragorn might have suspected Gandalf was Manwë himself, the king of the Valar, in disguise. While that wasn't true, it shows the level of reverence Aragorn held for him. This is why Aragorn, the heir of Isildur, consistently defers to Gandalf's leadership. He isn't following an old man. He is following an ambassador of the gods. And this brings us to the most interesting member of the Fellowship, Legolas Greenleaf. This is where the elven perspective truly matters. Elves perceive the world differently. They live in both the seen and the unseen worlds. Legolas is a Sindarin elf. His people know that spirits can take physical form. Melian the Maia did it in Doriath. When Legolas looked at Gandalf, he wouldn't just see the grey beard. He would likely sense the Fëa, the soul, burning within. Consider the encounter with the Balrog. Legolas is the first to recognize it. He cries out, "A Balrog! A Balrog is come!" while the others are confused. He recognizes the ancient spirit of fire. If he could recognize a fallen Maia of shadow, he undoubtedly recognized the Maia of light walking beside him. And let's not forget Glorfindel. Though not in the Fellowship in the movies, in the books, Glorfindel, who is a reincarnated elf lord, predicts the fall of the Witch King to Gandalf. Glorfindel absolutely knew exactly who Gandalf was, as they were peers in power. Legolas knew, but he stayed silent. Why? Because elves respect secrets. If the Grey Pilgrim wishes to be a Grey Pilgrim, Legolas will not be the one to unmask him. However, notice Galadriel and Celeborn's reaction to his death. When the Fellowship reaches Lothlórien, Celeborn is shocked. He says he would not have let Gandalf pass if he knew the danger. But Galadriel? She is sad, but she is not shocked in the same way. She knows the nature of Olórin better than anyone. Why did Tolkien leave this so vague? Why didn't Gandalf just tell them? As Christopher Tolkien points out in his commentaries, his father wanted the wizards to be limited. If Frodo knew that Gandalf was an angelic being, a holy spirit sent by the Creator, the dynamic would be broken. You don't joke with an angel. You don't scold a god for being late. You worship them. The mission of the Istari was to guide, not to rule. Gandalf needed the Fellowship to love him as a friend, not fear him as a deity. He needed to be the old man who complained about the cold and smoked pipeweed, because ultimately it was love for the old man, not awe of the Maia, that made them follow him into the dark. In the end, perhaps the greatest magic Gandalf ever performed wasn't lighting pine cones on fire or breaking the bridge of Khazad-dum. It was the fact that he, an immortal spirit older than the world itself, managed to become a true friend to a gardener from the Shire. Thank you for wandering into the deep lore with us today. I want to hear from you in the comments. If Boromir had known Gandalf was an angelic being, do you think he still would have tried to take the ring? If you enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing to the Elven Perspective. Until next time, may your road go ever on. Moria.